They made America laugh without mercy. But behind the Parkers, 1999, were blacklisting, broken bodies, lawsuits, and careers erased from Hollywood. By 2026, some faces are unrecognizable, and some lives never recovered. Monique as Nikki Parker. Monique was born on December 11, 1967, in Woodlawn, Maryland, United States. She was 32 years old when the Parkers premiered in 1999, taking on the role of Nikki Parker, loud, fearless, and impossible to ignore. Long before fame, Monique's life was shaped by trauma that never fully loosened its grip. From the ages of 7 to 11, she was sexually abused by her older brother, Gerald, a truth she carried in silence for decades. When she finally spoke publicly about the abuse as an adult, the revelation fractured her family rather than healing it. Comedy became both her shield and her weapon, a way to control pain before it could control her. The Parkers turned that raw survival energy into television gold. Nikki Parker was unapologetic, excessive, and emotionally exposed in ways few sitcom leads had ever dared. Even so, Monique proved her range beyond comedy, delivering a devastating, career-defining performance in Precious, which earned her the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in 2010. After publicly criticizing Hollywood's pay disparities and refusing unpaid promotional demands, Monique found herself quietly sidelined. The industry framed her as ungrateful rather than principled, and the momentum she had earned collapsed almost overnight. For years, she lived in professional exile, financially stable, but culturally erased, watching peers with less talent continue forward while she stood still. By 2026, Monique, at 58, has quietly re-emerged through stand-up comedy and carefully chosen acting roles. Countess Vaughn as Kimberly Ann, Kim Parker. Born on August 8, 1978, in Idabel, Oklahoma, Countess Vaughn was just 21 years old when the Parkers premiered in 1999, stepping into the role of Kimberly Ann Parker, Nikki's sharp-tongued, image-obsessed daughter who often felt like the emotional counterweight to her mother's chaos. Before the Parkers, she stood out on Moesha, praised for sharp confidence and comic timing. But as fame grew, attention shifted from talent to her body. Sitcom jokes bled into real life, becoming relentless body-shaming that, she later revealed, fractured her self-worth, triggering depression and disordered eating as the audience kept laughing. The professional fallout arrived alongside personal instability. Vaughn's early marriages, first to Joseph James, later to David Whitten, both ended in divorce within a few years, compounding emotional strain during a period when her acting opportunities were already shrinking. Shows like Celebrity Fit Club kept her visible, but at the cost of reinforcing a public narrative centered on weight, comebacks, and failure rather than talent. Vaughn later revealed battles with alopecia, which caused sudden hair loss, and spoke openly about the psychological toll of living under constant scrutiny. By 2026, Countess Vaughn is 48 years old. She lives largely outside the mainstream spotlight, appearing selectively in independent projects and public events. Dorien Wilson as Professor Stanley Ogilvy. Dorien Wilson, born on July 5, 1963, in Lompoc, California. He was 36 years old when the Parkers premiered in 1999, portraying Professor Stanley Ogilvy, charming, educated, and emotionally unavailable, the long-running object of Nikki Parker's obsession. Before the Parkers, Wilson had already built credibility in adult television with HBO's Dream On. But as the Parkers gained traction, Ogilvy began to eclipse the actor himself. The role was popular, familiar, and safe, and that safety became a trap. Casting narrowed. Opportunities outside the archetype slowed. As the series ran on, Wilson found himself increasingly associated with one character, one tone, one rhythm he could not fully escape. In February 2014, Wilson was arrested for driving under the influence, an incident that would quietly unravel his public image. The situation worsened the following year when he was convicted of a second DUI offense in 2015. The consequences were no longer symbolic. Jail time, probation, and a court order requiring an ignition interlock device installed in his vehicle. By 2026, Dorien Wilson is 62 years old. He continues to act in television and film, often in guest or supporting roles, carrying a career defined not by collapse, but by quiet limitation. Yvette Wilson as Andell Wilkerson. Born on March 6, 1964 in Los Angeles, California, Yvette Wilson grew up inside the city that would later test her limits. She was 35 years old when The Parkers premiered in 1999, playing Andell Wilkerson, the sharp-tongued bar owner whose sarcasm, toughness, and bruised warmth grounded the show's chaos. Long before The Parkers, she had become a fan favorite as Andell on Moesha, carving out space as a working-class woman who survived with humor rather than glamour. That continuity gave her something rare in sitcom television, a character arc that traveled across shows, evolving with lived-in credibility. In the late 2000s, Wilson was diagnosed with cervical cancer, a battle she fought largely out of public view. Treatments were aggressive, exhausting, and financially draining. As her health declined, kidney failure followed, forcing her to step away from acting altogether. The industry that had relied on her energy moved on without pause, leaving her isolated at the exact moment she needed stability the most. Yvette Wilson died on June 14, 2012, in Los Angeles, California, at the age of 48, from complications related to cervical cancer and kidney disease. Jenna von Oÿ as Stevie Van Lowe. Jenna von Oÿ, born on May 2, 1977 in Danbury, Connecticut. She was 22 years old when The Parkers premiered in 1999, appearing as Stevie Van Lowe, a recurring, sharp-edged presence whose sarcasm and confidence cut cleanly through the show's emotional noise. By the time she joined The Parkers, Von Oÿ already carried the invisible weight of a former child star. She had spent her adolescence on Blossom, growing up in front of millions while learning early that fame does not guarantee safety. When Blossom ended, the transition into adulthood proved brutal. The role was smaller, temporary, and ultimately unable to reset the trajectory that had stalled years earlier. As acting opportunities thinned, Von Oÿ faced a quieter crisis, one without headlines. She stepped away from Hollywood's center, navigating financial uncertainty and the psychological toll of being known everywhere yet needed nowhere. Writing became a lifeline. Through essays and later books, she began documenting motherhood, identity, and the aftermath of early fame, reframing loss into authorship rather than disappearance. Now, Jenna von Oÿ is 49 years old. She lives largely outside the acting spotlight, working as an author, speaker, and occasional performer. Thomas Mikal Ford as Mel Parker. Rollo. Born on September 5, 1964 in Los Angeles, California, Thomas Mikal Ford came up through stand-up comedy before television ever learned his name. He was 35 years old when The Parkers premiered in 1999, playing Mel Parker, affectionately known as Rollo, the dependable, level-headed counterbalance inside a world built on chaos. In the early 1990s, he became a household name as Tommy Strawn on Martin, the sharp-dressed, endlessly loyal friend whose humor never relied on cruelty. That role made him beloved, but it also locked him into a single image. When Martin ended, Ford found himself facing an industry that loved familiarity but feared evolution. Financial pressure mounted as roles thinned, forcing him to juggle touring, motivational speaking, and independent projects to stay afloat. Health issues followed, compounding stress he rarely spoke about publicly. In October 2016, Ford was hospitalized in Atlanta after suffering a ruptured abdominal aneurysm. Complications escalated quickly, and despite intensive care, his condition deteriorated beyond recovery. Thomas Mikal Ford died on October 12, 2016, at the age of 52 in Atlanta, Georgia. Cherie Johnson as Tiffany. Cherie Johnson, born on November 21, 1975 in Palo Alto, California. She was 24 years old when the Parkers premiered in 1999, appearing as Tiffany, a recurring supporting character whose calm presence contrasted with the show's constant emotional noise. Before the Parkers, she was already familiar to audiences from sitcom work in the 1990s, but acting was never her only goal. While others chased visibility, Johnson quietly learned the machinery behind television, working closely with producers and writers while still appearing on screen. As the early 2000s arrived, Johnson made a deliberate pivot, rather than waiting for opportunities to disappear. Acting roles slowed, but she transitioned behind the camera, choosing authorship over exposure. She became a television writer and producer, contributing to animated and live-action projects that allowed her creative control without public scrutiny. The shift was not dramatic, but it was decisive. A move away from an industry that often traps actresses in cycles of diminishing returns. By 2026, Cherie Johnson is 50 years old. She works primarily as a writer and producer, largely absent from the spotlight, yet securely embedded in television's infrastructure, Morrow as Desiree Littlejohn. Morrow, born on July 21, 1968 in Oakland, California. She was 31 years old when the Parkers premiered in 1999, appearing as Desiree Littlejohn, a poised and attractive recurring character whose presence subtly disrupted the emotional dynamics around her. Throughout the 1990s, she moved fluidly across popular television, landing roles on shows like Family Matters and Sister, where her screen presence suggested upward momentum. Casting directors saw versatility, but not longevity. Even when she joined The Young and the Restless, the exposure failed to translate into lasting security, reinforcing a pattern of visibility without footing. As the 2000s progressed, the gaps between roles widened. There was no public scandal, no dramatic collapse, only the slow realization that consistent work did not equal a sustainable career. The industry's attention shifted, and Morrow faced the same quiet crossroads as many working actors: continue chasing diminishing returns or redefine success entirely. As of 2026, Morrow is 57 years old. Having transitioned into real estate and business ventures, she lives outside the entertainment spotlight. Ken Lawson as Thaddeus Tyrell T. Radcliffe. Ken Lawson, born on January 19, 1976 in West Covina, California. He was 23 years old when the Parkers premiered in 1999, cast as Thaddeus Tyrell T. Radcliffe, Kim Parker's boyfriend, a smooth-talking presence whose confidence often masked immaturity and insecurity. The Parkers gave him visibility, and guest roles across popular black sitcoms of the era suggested momentum. Yet the industry's ceiling came quickly. The character of T became a familiar box, charming, unserious, disposable, and casting rarely imagined him beyond it. As sitcom demand waned in the early 2000s, opportunities narrowed, and the transition from young heartthrob to adult leading man never arrived. Without a breakout role to anchor his career, Lawson faced the same unspoken reality many mid-tier actors encounter: recognition without leverage. Auditions slowed. Visibility evaporated. Rather than endure years of professional limbo, he gradually stepped away from acting, choosing stability over persistence in an industry that no longer called. The decision was not dramatic, but it was final. A withdrawal shaped by pragmatism rather than failure. By 2026, Ken Lawson is 50 years old. He lives largely outside the entertainment spotlight, remembered by fans of the Parkers as a symbol of a specific television era, and by the industry as one more example of how quickly momentum can vanish once youth-driven demand expires. Flex Alexander as Flex Washington. Flex Alexander, born Mark Alexander Knox on April 15, 1970, in Harlem, New York City. He was 29 years old when the Parkers debuted in 1999, appearing as Flex Washington, a familiar, high-energy presence whose charisma fits seamlessly into the loud, fast-talking world of UPN-era sitcoms. His visibility on the Parkers helped propel him into the lead role on One, a series that ran for 5 seasons and cemented him as a recognizable face of black television comedy. On screen, everything worked: steady paychecks, syndication, audience love. When One ended, the fall came fast. Work slowed, income collapsed. At his lowest point, Alexander publicly acknowledged that he had lost nearly everything: savings, property, and financial stability, despite years of primetime success. Depression set in as he confronted the most brutal lesson of sitcom stardom. Success on television does not guarantee survival once the cameras shut down. Alexander rebuilt not through a comeback, but through surrender. Faith became his anchor as he stepped away from Hollywood's approval cycle, choosing healing over visibility. He spoke openly about bankruptcy, ego, and the shame of starting over, turning personal collapse into testimony rather than spectacle. By 2026, Flex Alexander is 56 years old. He remains active through selective acting, stand-up, and motivational speaking, remembered not as a fallen star, but as a survivor. The Parkers once sold laughter, confidence, and the illusion of permanence. But time revealed the cost. Careers stalled, bodies failed, and fame slipped away faster than anyone expected. Which story from the Parkers stayed with you the longest? Share your thoughts, and stay with us as we continue uncovering what really happened after the cameras stopped.